Whenever the GOP starts throwing up smoke and mirrors, you can be sure it's because they don't want you to pay attention to what the men are really doing behind the curtain. And so in this week's edition of Republican Smoke and Mirrors, it's their claim that it's the Democrats who are really waging a war on women. Using the opportunity of Anthony Weiner, Eliot Spitzer and Bob Filner topping the news, ShePAC, a Conservative Political Action Committee with ties to Sarah Palin, sent an email to supporters which read in part, "Liberal men are leading a violent war on women," adding, "The real war on women is coming from the left." Indeed, those are three incidents of despicable behaviour by men who happen to be Democrats. But this is not to be confused with the real actual war being waged against women's reproductive rights, continuing to be fought by our friends in the Republican Party. That war has already claimed victories in Texas and North Carolina and is now making a move to bring the battle to the national stage. For more, I'm delighted to say we're joined by Ilyse Hogue, president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. Good afternoon, Ilyse.
Hi, Martin. Great to be on.
Thank you. Is the right simply politicizing these men who have made horrible mistakes, or do they really not understand the difference between a legislative agenda that restricts the rights of women versus a few isolated incidents of abominable behavior by men against women?
Look, harassment is a problem throughout our culture. Unfortunately, we see it in both parties. But the right's outrage was not at all apparent when, say, Herman Cain was accused of similar harassment.
Yes, I can't remember them ever coming out and complaining about that, no.
And so
or when Rush Limbaugh called Sandra Fluke a slut. I don't remember them coming out much then.
And I think, American women need more than crocodile tears on the part of the right to solve the very complex problems that are facing us right now in our real lives. The GOP are the ones that are suggesting that women should carry their rapist babies. The GOPs are the ones suggesting that politicians should decide the fate of our families, particularly in extremely medically complicated situations. There are few people in the world that Americans are trusting less these days than politicians. Certainly Americans trust women, our doctors, more than they do to make these very difficult decisions than the white politicians, as you point out, are legislating these laws.
Right. On the national level, several GOP senators, including Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, are trying to advance a bill that would ban abortion after 20 weeks, a measure that passed in the House last month. Is there any chance of this sort of measure actually making it out of the Senate?
Well, we hope not. I mean, look, we think when Americans actually hear the stories, for example, of my friend Dana, who got a horrific diagnosis and a wanted pregnancy post 20 weeks and faced one of the most difficult decisions of her lives. These are the stories that are the real stories of women who seek this medical procedure after 20 weeks. And one of the things that we know is when people hear these stories, they understand the complexity. They understand that these are not decisions politicians should be involved in.
Yeah, because when I hear these senators speak about abortion, they seem to be describing women who are not complicated, there's no compassion, it's just as if women are running around willy-nilly undergoing these very severe radical procedures, but there are real medical justifications in many of these cases.
There are absolutely medical justifications. This is a tiny proportion of abortion services in this country. It's less than 2%. And if these senators are really interested in tending to women's health in this country, let's have a real conversation about access early in pregnancy to prenatal care, to comprehensive testing, to abortion services in the first 3 months, regardless of your financial status. Let's talk about real sex ed. Let's stop trying to outlaw contraception. That's the full agenda of the GOP. The 20-week ban is just the beginning for them. We saw this in Texas when the ink had barely dried on the bill that Rick Perry passed, and they introduced a 6-week ban on abortion. This is a really radical agenda, and it does not care a whit about women's health. It certainly doesn't care a whit about women's rights and family rights in this country.
I'm reminded of the words of the great Joan Didion. Any compulsion always tries to justify itself. Ilyse Hogue, president of NARAL. Thank you so much, Ilyse.
Thank you, Martin.
And we'll be right back.